cheers for the first episode of KSMedia Podcast, I guess.
Yeah.
All right.
Cheers, Keigo.
This is not a fairy tale. I know this life.
All right. Hey guys, it's Keigo from KSMedia, and this is the first episode of my podcast, which I don't have a proper name, but I'm just calling it KSMedia Podcast for now. I'm currently in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I was planning to do this podcast in Japanese actually, but I was like, why not do it in English while I'm still in the United States? But someday, I don't know, I might do it in Japanese sometimes in English. Who knows what's in this world of 2020, so.
Nice.
But for today, even though this is the first episode, I already have a guest, which is quite weird as a first episode of the podcast, but this is my roommate, Glenn. Do you want to introduce yourself, who you are, and then where you're from, what do you do now?
Yeah. So, hi everyone. My name is Glenn Branley. I'm 22 years old, going to be 23 in December. Currently living in the United States in Cambridge, Massachusetts with Keigo. And I'm a software engineer, an iOS software engineer to be exact. And yeah, having a great time. Just graduated college, living
Together.
life. Yeah. Yeah, together.
What's your thoughts on podcasts in general? Like, do you listen to podcasts or?
Yeah, I like podcasts. I think I've seen them grow in the past 5 years, let's say.
Yeah.
Everyone has a podcast.
That's
now.
true. That's really true.
Yeah, I like podcasts. I don't listen to them too often. I feel like I'm very busy. I don't really have the time to listen to podcasts. I've started running a little bit since Movember started, trying to grow my little stash. The mistake of a stash it is.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I like podcasts, just don't really have the time to sit down and listen to them too often.
I think it's really interesting that technically everybody can have podcasts down and tell their stories or talk about themselves, their lives, what's their thoughts, and great.
Yeah, there's a lot of apps as well nowadays, that makes the whole process a lot easier.
Right.
Like Anchor is an app that's pretty popular for on-the-go kind of podcasts. I also think Spotify is making things a lot easier for people. I know they have kind of a student program kind of setting up now
really?
too for
Didn't know that.
podcasts. If you have a mini podcast running that has up to 100 episodes or something like that, they're trying to promote you now even more.
That's great. That's really great.
Yeah. I think podcasting in general is very informative. I feel like I learn a lot from a podcast. I think there's also a lot of genres of podcasting. It's definitely an interesting style of media. Yeah. And one thing that I have a couple friends from back home or people that I went to secondary school with in Ireland, and a lot of them there's a good few people who have podcasts now just on various platforms. Right. I like listening to them because I'm not in Ireland. It kind of gives me that sense of home a little bit more.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to hear about their lives and what they're doing. And I love seeing people do things.
Yeah.
And even something like a podcast is it's a lot easier nowadays, like we said. But yeah, I really like watching my friends.
Yeah, I think it's
at
really a
home.
fun way to catch up on them.
Yeah, it is.
The fact that we are outside of our home country, I'm from Japan, you're from Ireland.
Yeah.
And I think one of the way I try to catch up with my friends back in country is what's their Twitter, what's their Instagram, Facebook, and that kind of stuff. But if they have the podcast or YouTube, I think it's really easier to have a connection with them. Just watching them is
Yeah.
oh, you're doing this, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Why don't you tell me how you ended up in let's say Scranton.
Yes.
Right? In general, how did you? Well, let's say start from Ireland, right? How did you end up being in United States?
Okay. So yeah, it's a good question. There's a long-winded answer to this question. So I'm from Dublin, Ireland. I went to a good high school in Ireland called Belvedere College. Had a great time there. It was a Jesuit high school. I think it was one of 5 Jesuit high schools in Ireland. My guidance counselor, when I was in my 5th year in Ireland, secondary school is 6 years long, kind of includes middle school as well. So the guidance counselor was there's this Scranton scholarship that's offered to one Irish student from a Jesuit secondary school every year. It was around like, let's say September of my 6th year. So it was the beginning of my 6th year. I had the application in hand. I knew what the application process was going to be like.
Right.
And I felt that, like I was a big technology person. I'm still am a big technology person. Ireland at the time was growing in technology, and it's still growing.
Right.
It's probably one of the biggest hubs for technology in Europe. But I still felt that America had more opportunity for my field of work,
Right.
being a software engineer and also being an iOS engineer, more
Right.
specifically. Like that niche field, there's more jobs and more opportunities over here for that. I guess anybody who's American and watching this podcast right now will probably wonder why study computer science at Scranton? I guess I felt I was always kind of an ambitious person. Mm-hmm. It didn't really matter where I had to be to succeed. Scranton was just like my kind of window into the United States. Right. And it was one of the best decisions I've ever made. I'm still here 4 years later. But yeah, it was America that it's just the ambition to do really well and succeed is very prevalent in this country.
Right.
Ireland Ireland's a great country. Don't get me wrong. It can be quite negative when it comes to success. I think that's changing a lot.
Okay.
But I think anyone watching this from Ireland at least will say that Americans come across as very positive. Right. Very positive. If you want to do something, you can go ahead and do it. You can achieve
we
it.
always talk about this. It's when we have an idea of starting something, even if it's a small thing, or even like a big, really, really ambitious stuff. I think, at least from where I'm from, if I said, I think this idea could be something, people will be like, oh, there are tons of people who are thinking exactly the same thing as you. It's not that big deal. You should focus on more stable jobs or more, let's say, study, right? Academic stuff. But when I come to America and talk to my friends about, I'm thinking of starting this and that, and they'd be like, oh, that's amazing. You should do that. You should do it now. I mean, what are you waiting for? There's not much of risk. You should do it. I think that's the positive stuff of, I guess, in being in America, physically, and having people like that, surrounding you, I guess.
Yeah, no, I agree. We've had this conversation in the past. It lives and breathes over here. That success, the American dream. Everyone wants the American dream. I don't even know what the American dream is, really. But I'm striving towards that, and I'm having a great time at the moment, where I am.
Yeah, let's talk about the first day of your college. How was it?
Okay. So I landed in the United States. So let me just tell, I guess, the little story about how I got to the United States. So I finished secondary school at the end of June in 2016. I found out I was coming to Scranton or going to Scranton in the end of June as well. It was very quick. September is when you find out what colleges you go to in Ireland. It's very different, the process. You have to take one exam or one leaving certificate exam. Basically, you have points, and then you apply for which courses you want to do at what universities. If you have enough points, you get the course. But you don't find out until September. So I had already submitted that application for which schools I wanted to go to in Ireland. Part of the Scranton scholarship is that they didn't want to tell me that I had received the scholarship until after I finished my leaving certificate. Yeah, so I finished my leaving cert at the end of June, and then I think in July my flight was booked to go to the United States, and it was the first. I had went to the United States in 2013 as part of my secondary school. I went on a high school exchange to Boston, actually, funnily enough, but. Yeah, so I went in 2013 to the United States for the first time, but I had a return flight. The second time I booked a flight to America, I had no return flight, so it was a one-way flight, and I had never booked a one-way flight before. I didn't. It's
always scary, isn't it? Because you don't. Yeah, that's what we now have to do, kind of, right?
Yeah.
I mean, now we have the home, so we kind of have to have the round trip. But the first one. we always have to have a one way because you don't know when you're coming back.
Yeah.
Or even if you are planning to coming back, it's like a half a year later.
Mm-hmm. No, it was definitely a weird experience because it was so quick as well. Like when I finished my leaving cert, like I was working towards this big exam, a leaving certificate in Ireland. I was going to college in Ireland. Like when you finish that, you're like, okay, I'm going to go to college. Like that's in Ireland. That's your plan really. And then all of a sudden, I found out at the same time that I was doing this exam that I was coming to America. So my whole like world changed. I had to change my mindset to like, okay, I'm not going to be seeing the people that I went to school with
or
in
even
Ireland,
your family.
or even my family for a while.
How did they think?
I think they were all very supportive of like the whole decision.
Were they surprised though?
I think, yeah, a little bit, I think. Because anybody who's talking about like the scholarship to Scranton is a really good scholarship. It's called, actually, I want to talk about that just because it's so it's such a good thing. So the Scranton scholarship, it's called the Reddington Scholarship, started in the 1980s. Mrs. Reddington and her husband moved over to the United States from Ireland in the 80s or around that time and had and donated a bunch of money to the University of Scranton to bring over one student every year. The scholarship itself was like a full scholarship.
Right.
So, and like, that's what's so fantastic about it is like, it's an academic scholarship. You have to like do well in your academics, but it's also like a need-based scholarship too. So like, if you don't come from a background that has a lot of money, they have this scholarship that gives somebody in Ireland the chance to succeed in America. But yeah, I forget what your question was before that, but that's what the Reddington Scholarship is. It's like, it's one of the best things. Yeah.
Yeah. I said, I think the question was like, how did your family think? Like how,
So,
because obviously like I don't know if you were even ready to come to America. Your mindset has to change in, just like that in just a week.
Yeah. I know it was I was kind of mentally preparing myself as well. Like, it wasn't in my hands. Like the scholarship itself was never in my hands until I was told.
Right.
But I was fairly confident going up to it that like I had a good chance at getting this. So it wasn't a super difficult transition because I knew, but it was, I think it probably was a little bit more for maybe my family. It didn't really come across that way. Maybe they just didn't say it to me, but at the time, everyone was very supportive about me going over. Thankfully, the university had a bunch of other Irish students. There was only two other Irish students. So older students. So there was a sophomore and there was also a senior when I went to Scranton first. So they kind of helped me transition as well. So I think that kind of made my family feel a lot better about me coming.
Right, because they'd be like, oh, they're more Irish students.
Yeah.
They should know. They should know how to help you.
Yeah, and show me the ropes. And they both did. Like they showed me the ropes.
Amazing,
yeah. Without those two guys, Kieran and Peter.
Shout out to
shout out to Kieran and Peter. When I first came over, they helped me out a ton. Yeah, for sure. Just with acclimating and stuff like that. So I guess I'm going off topic, but I flew to America on the 18th of August.
Okay. I don't even remember the date.
Because we had international orientation to go to. I don't really remember the moment that we met. I remember the room that we were in. I remember we were sitting at like a round table in the Rose Room at the University of Scranton on the 5th floor of Brennan. So I know exactly where it was. I just don't remember the interaction. I just think it was very overwhelming because at that point on campus, I was kind of mentally preparing myself for everyone else arriving.
Right.
Because I didn't know I only knew the two Irish guys there. I didn't know any Americans. Like, so when I moved into my dorm, I was the only one there in the whole building. I remember we had the international orientation. It was very helpful. Like we met other international students. We kind of bonded from that. And yeah, I made a bunch of friends before all the American students moved in. So it made it easier. It made that.
I think for me, when the first time we met was, I think there's a piano on that 5th floor, don't you?
Yeah, there is.
And I think I was playing piano because I just knew some songs on the piano or whatever. And then I think you walked over to the piano when I was playing, and then you said, I think, oh, you play piano.
Yeah, I think I do remember that now.
And I said, not much. But I think that's the first conversation. And then we figured out we both play guitars and that kind of stuff. And then I think that helped us make connections better than just, hey, I'm Keigo, I'm from Japan. You know, I think it's better to just find something similar between us of like in music and playing music and that kind of stuff. I think that's my memory. I don't even know if that's the first interaction.
That's brought me back. Yeah, I remember that interaction. I remember going over to the piano.
All right. So I kind of want to talk about how you get into coding, because you have changed my life twice. One time you told me how to program. Oh, not even teaching, but like showing me what you were doing with all this programming, and I get into it, and that's part of my career now. And so that's one time you changed, and then second time is moving to here, you know?
Wow, yeah.
So you changed my life twice, but I'm curious, what changed your life, right? Now, that's what you study for, that's what your career is now, as a software engineering. How did it all start?
Okay, it's a good question.
The first programming stuff. Let's say, how did you start learning about technology stuff?
So, thankfully, my family, like growing up, we always kind of had a piece of technology in the house. Like whether that was like a Nokia phone, like a small phone or whatever. So we always kind of had technology. But it was my older brother, Connor, who got a PC, a Windows PC. I have no idea when he got it, but it was a long time ago. So I started coding on that PC for the first time when I was like 9 years old. Yeah, I don't know how I did, but I started on that PC when I was like 9.
Okay.
And I started with Flash and ActionScript 3, which was like, Flash isn't supported anymore, but it once was. And it was really good for building Flash games and stuff like that. I was a big gamer growing up too. I loved playing video games. So I started trying to make games. I just remember not understanding what code was, but I just remember it being so difficult and not being able to learn it. And I think it was way over my head in the beginning. So I just kind of put that aside and I didn't touch that for a long time. And I really haven't touched it since, to be honest, but it did spark my interest in coding in general. So then I was like, okay, I want to build something. At the time, websites were kind of the in thing. Apps didn't really exist, like building apps. Right. There was no iPhone really at that time. Like there was the iPhone, I'm pretty sure, like around that time, but there was no app store. Right. And if there was, it was completely over my head because I would have no idea what was going on at that time in Apple's development. So I was like, okay, there has to be like an easier way for me to get into this. But like I said, websites were big at the time. So I was like, okay, I want to learn how to make a website. I want to know how to code a website. So I learned HTML and CSS. That was all I knew. So I just kind of came up with these projects that I would work on. And I would just look at websites. So I would look at, let's say, Facebook, for example. But I actually redesigned, I built the Facebook, like the original Facebook, thefacebook.com. You can look up pictures on Google of that website at the time. It was very basic, very plain. So it was easy for me to kind of get into that process to build websites. But yeah, so I started with web development. I dabbled a little bit with PHP to try to make like users and try to make a website, but I never really got anywhere with it. I was just building projects for myself, just coding solely just to build my knowledge. And I loved it. And that was really all I did was code. Like I coded, and then I would play video games, code. It sounds like a sad life, but like it turned out fairly good in the end.
I mean, I think for me, like, I'm kind of jealous that you had that when you were young. Yeah. Because obviously, like, as I said, like you changed my life when I was in the first year of college. And I think the first thing you showed me was actually the website. You showed me how the tags works. And I'm like, oh, I could probably figure that out.
Yeah,
and
it's not that difficult when you think about it.
So you started from websites.
Yes. First started from websites, and then in 2011 or 2012 or whenever that time was when Minecraft popped like huge. I think Minecraft came out like 2009, 2010, maybe around that time. But what really interested me in the game was the modding community behind the game.
Modding is, if you explain.
Yeah, so modding is basically modifying the code to perform a different action that the game would normally perform. Adding a new feature, making the game perform in a different way, basically. But yeah, so the modding scene started, and there was a community that started forming around that.
Right.
And it was really a Windows-based modding community. There wasn't a lot of Mac or Apple Mac developers. I had dabbled a little bit in Java in the past, but I didn't know what the correlation was between writing a basic window and then also writing, like modding the game. Like I couldn't figure that out. That was so difficult for me. So I watched a bunch of YouTube tutorials on Windows, and those tutorials were great because it opened my eyes to what I could do. And then I had a Mac. I got a Mac. Thankfully, it goes back to my family again. If I didn't have that Mac, it was my first MacBook Pro. I don't know when I got it. I think like 2010, 2011, around that time, I got a MacBook Pro. Like so young getting MacBook Pro. But if I didn't get that, I wouldn't have started developing mods for Minecraft. Right. So then I started making my own mods, and I felt there was no Mac scene on YouTube. There was no Mac developers, no big Mac developers.
Right.
So I started a YouTube channel, and I started coding in Java and teaching people how to make mods for Minecraft on a Mac.
Right.
So I got a lot of the Mac customers like watching my videos, which was nice because I ended up getting like 250,000 views. If I go back, they're like 250,000 views, like 100,000 views, like 50,000 views, all from this like 13-year-old whatever coding, like making mods for the game. So that opened my eyes to what I could do, what was like at my reach, like what I could potentially do. And then at the same time, I was like, okay, I want to start maybe building my own games here if I can do this, and maybe go back. It kind of goes back to when I started, like with Flash and ActionScript and stuff like that. Maybe I could start making games in Java. Maybe this is my route to go, because if this game can make millions and billions of dollars just by being written in Java, and I know Java, then I can do the same thing if I just watch a bunch of tutorials and read a bunch of blogs online. And I did that. I started making games, and I built a bunch of games, and I built story mode games, and I entered a bunch of competitions to build games with Java. Yeah, so my career kind of started with me making YouTube videos, teaching people how to code in Java as like a 13 and 14-year-old.
On a Mac.
Which is,
that's important. That's important
on a Mac too. So, and it wasn't easy. It definitely was not easy. But I was also not just doing that. I was also building a few websites for people on the side, making a little bit of money here and there. And then from there, it kind of goes fast forward to like 2014, really, when Swift got announced at WWDC in 2014. And that was probably the moment where like my life really changed a lot more.
What were you
to
doing?
Be where I am right now? I think that was like the biggest impact in my life when Swift was released.
But at that time you were already, using the programming as a tool to create something. Why was Swift so special for you from Java when you can create something?
Yes.
Like, both language can create something.
Yep.
Why was it so different?
I think it goes back to the point that Java has been around for over 20 years. Right. And I felt that I did not have the knowledge at that time to build anything meaningful in any way in Java. I could build games, but it couldn't be released to the masses. Okay. Like I could build a Java game. I could put it on my Twitter. I could send an email out, but no one would really look at my game in Java. But when Swift came out, Swift offered so much more opportunities for people like me and people who like to create things because you have the App Store.
Right. It could reach to thousands
to millions and even
people.
I think there's 1 billion iPhones right now. Like that was just something not feasible with Java at that time. I know there's Android apps and stuff like that now, so Java's great for that. But for what I wanted to do, I couldn't reach the masses. Right. And that's what Swift really gave to me, was the ability to reach the masses. And also it was a brand new language, and I was very scared to look at Objective-C at the time. I think anybody looking at Objective-C,
still get scared.
Yeah, and so do I. I still get scared too looking at Objective-C. But Objective-C was like one of those things that I think pushed a lot of people away from development.
Right. Just in case the people understand Objective-C, is that was the language that Apple used to use before they created the new language called Swift. That's how they created all the apps for iPhone and all the Macs too.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
But it was really for people who were like super educated in software engineering and computer science, and like really understood how memory worked in a computer, how all this was managed.
Before you started.
And I couldn't sit down and have the time to even teach myself Objective-C. So when Swift was released, I remember WWDC came out with the manual, the Swift book manual or whatever it was called at the time, the Swift programming book. And I read the whole book from day one back to front. Like I read the whole Swift book, and I downloaded Swift Playgrounds, and I started coding in Swift. So I had the background knowledge of coding and or programming in general, and what I needed to do to build something. But yeah, Swift made that so much easier for so many people.
I agree. I mean, you kind of pulled me into the programming world.
Yeah.
And then I think I stick to it just because of Swift.
Yeah.
The level that you have to be to start was really low for Swift. And I really like that.
Yeah, extremely low.
Yeah. So now you kind of start into Swift. I know you had crazy achievement with the Swift. You get into Apple's top 20 under 20 in 2015.
Yeah, I think it was the end of 2015 that I got inducted into that. So like that, I started app development 2014. I built my first app that was launched in the App Store in 2015, which was Hurry App. And Hurry App was one of the first apps on the Apple Watch store. It was on the Apple Watch store the day of launch day.
Right. You want to explain what it did?
Yeah. So Hurry App was an app that was built for the Apple Watch that literally told people to hurry up. You would add friends and you would just tap their name and it would send them a hurry up message. Right. So yeah, Hurry App was built for the watch. I was fortunate enough to be flown to Apple in London that year to work at an Apple Watch lab. So I saw the Apple Watch before it was launched. But yeah, I got contacted by Apple I contacted Apple. I don't know how I got the contact. I would have to look that up somehow to see how I got the contact. But I got in contact with Apple Developer Relations, and I would recommend anyone to do that because it worked for me. I emailed Apple. I told them that I don't think it would work now because I'm 22 years old, but at the time I was 14 or 15.
I'm this young guy.
50, yeah. Around that time, I was this young guy. This guy is going to do great things, all that kind of stuff. So I was like, okay, this may work or may not work. So I emailed them and I got a response from an Apple Developer Relations employee. And they said, wow, you're doing really great work. Like, keep going. That was it. And then I was like, okay. And I got nothing more from them until I sent another email. I sent another email with like the simulator running the Apple Watch. As developers, we didn't have the Apple Watch to work on. So all we had was a simulator at the time. Right. So I was just developing on a simulator. There wasn't a lot of resources online to learn how to build apps. So I built an Apple Watch app and then I kept building it. And then I kept also sending emails. And I probably got really annoying at the end of it, but I ended up getting an email one day at the end of Coding Club from Apple saying, we'd like to bring you and your friend over. But we were below 18 at the time, so we couldn't fly to Apple, or they wanted someone over 18 to come with us. So my brother Connor got to come along to London, which was nice.
Good for him too.
Yeah, and this was all paid by Apple. Like we didn't pay a cent. So Apple booked my flight the next day. And then a couple days later, it was probably like a week or two later, maybe, I got up at 5 a.m. and we flew from Dublin to London. I arrived at the London Heathrow Airport, and you know, they had an airport, they normally have like Keigo or Glen, a name or whatever. It had an Apple logo.
That's insane.
Yeah, it just had an Apple logo, no name, no nothing. And we were like, okay, this must be the guy. So we got there, it was like in a Mercedes Benz. We got like chauffeured from there to the Apple headquarters. We arrived at the Apple headquarters in London, and I remember going into my brother wasn't able to see the Apple Watch. He wasn't allowed into the room because we were the developers.
Right.
So I got there, signed the non-disclosure agreement. I sat down at like a desk with Ralph, and there was probably 15 or 20 other developers in the room at the same time. Whole adults. There was a guy from Twitter. There was a guy from Instagram. Like, I don't even know if Instagram has an Apple Watch app anymore, but at the time everyone wanted to build an Apple Watch app. It was a cool thing to do. There was a guy from like Germany who was building an app for the German railroad. And then there was me and Ralph, who were like these 15-year-old guys building an app that tells people to hurry up.
Right.
So there was a big divide there in terms of who was over. And I just remember Apple, when I signed my non-disclosure agreement, there was like at the desk in the room, like the room was like a room that had like a door that was completely locked. You couldn't, if I wanted to leave, I had to like put my phones down and all that kind of stuff. But when I signed a non-disclosure agreement, they put special stickers over my iPhone camera, so I couldn't take pictures. They gave me a little baggie. It was the weirdest thing.
Can you talk about this?
I think so.
Hopefully.
I got a baggie with like an Apple Watch to build Apple Watches on. So I built an Apple Watch app at that. This was the very first time that I saw the app running on the watch.
Right.
And I had no idea if it was going to run on the watch. Like, cause I had never had the watch.
Right.
Cause we had this weird feature in our app that was double tap. So I wanted the double tap feature to bring the user to the next screen or something.
Right.
And double tap is just tapping the screen quickly twice. But there was no real good way to test that on the simulator. So when I put it on the watch, I remember looking at my watch and being like, okay, let me test the double tap. And I tested the double tap and it worked. And I was like, wow, this is working. Like
that's exactly what you wanted.
Yeah, I had no idea this was going to work.
Right.
So then we just developed and asked a bunch of questions. I learned so much from like.
So you
Apple.
developed in front of other like Apple people, and also other.
Everyone was kind of working on their own thing. Everyone was kind of like chatting, and like everyone was just really excited because this was the first time any of us had seen the Apple Watch. It wasn't even out on the stores at the time. The Apple employees were like fantastic. Like the help that they gave me and Ralph at the time was great. And because we were so young, I think they checked up on us a lot to make sure we were doing okay. And we were able to build an app because I think maybe they wanted somebody to build an app for the Apple Watch, like someone so young. And I think that's what kind of appealed to them, was like, I was young at the time. So this looks good if they can have a 15-year-old build an app and get it on the App Store.
Right.
And if it wasn't for that, like that, just that alone opened so many doors. Right. Because I think a couple of weeks later, I started preparing the app a lot more, and I prepared it for the Apple Watch launch day. So I remember just being like, wow, my app is on the App Store. And then a couple weeks later, some random person sent me an email one day and said, oh, did you see your app is featured on the top 20 under 20 section on the Apple Watch, or on the App Store, the main App Store. That like was a crazy experience for me. Like it just was unbelievable.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Also, I found you were top 20 young entrepreneurs on the same year too.
It was the same year. Yeah, that whole time was a crazy time. There was, because I was... So
that was in Ireland?
That was also in Ireland, yeah.
But you were selected...
It was the top, I think it was like the top 20 under 20 or top 10 under 10, top 10 under 20 entrepreneurs in Ireland or something like that. So...
That was a big year for you.
That was a big year for me.
2015?
2015, yeah. It was a big year because I got to attend a conference called the Web Summit, which is at the time was Europe's, probably still is Europe's biggest tech conference. Like Elon Musk has presented at it. The year I was there, Ed Catmull from Pixar was there. There was Tony Fadell from Google and Nest was there. So there was a lot of big people there. But in Ireland, there's a bank called Allied Irish Bank, and I think I reached out to them, they were running a competition to see who the top entrepreneur was in Ireland, and you had to submit like kind of this project that you had to make, and they had criteria for it. So they promoted us as like the top 10 or whatever. We probably weren't, but it made us feel cool, and we got to go to this giant tech conference for free. And I was just like, wow, this is insane. So I think the following year, it was this was the year before that I went to the conference as the top 10 under 20 or whatever. And then I went again the following year with an app, with a company. So I built Hurry App, and we reached out to the Allied Irish Bank again, the connections that we made there from the previous year. And I reached out and was like, we have this app and we'd love to be able to get funding to go to the Web Summit. It was like 3,000 euros to go for like a stand and all these different things. Right. So it was 3,000 euros to do it. And they ended up sponsoring us, and I got 3,000 euros to go to this conference. And thank you so much to Allied Irish Bank, because if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't have been able to go. Right. But yeah, we were like one of the youngest people to present at the Web Summit that year. And we ended up not bringing Hurry App. We brought a different app called Locadot, which was like a location-based.
Another big thing, wasn't it?
Another big thing, yeah, because I also built it on iOS and Android. Right. I built 2 apps. And we ended up bringing that instead of Hurry App because it had more potential. Hurry App was just send hurry up. Right. Although it was the first app on the Watch store, people didn't see that because no one really had an Apple Watch at that time, because no one really cared. And even today, Apple Watch apps are still not the best, or they're not easy to use often.
You want to briefly talk about the Locadot? What it does? Yeah. What does it do?
So it was a location-based. We promoted it as a location-based data analytics company.
That sounds so...
It sounds really fancy, but it basically just allowed you download an app on your phone. You could send your friend a code, special unique code that you could randomly generate. There was no names, no accounts, nothing attached.
No username.
No username. And then you would just press broadcast to broadcast your location. And then if you're on, it was kind of a safety thing to know where people were. Right. Or your family or friends. So you would give them this unique code, and then they would type the code in and click search, and they would be able to find you. So we had a web platform, we had an Android and an iOS app. So we supported this whole platform. Yeah, the whole platform. I was kind of really against bringing Locadot to the Web Summit as our product, because the original idea was to bring Hurry App. Right. But after some conversation with Ralph and stuff like that, it ended up being the better decision to bring Locadot. We got t-shirts made and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I just remember being surrounded by all these big companies, some companies that are even bigger today, and meeting networking and meeting all these famous people at the Web Summit. At such a young age, I was blown away by that. And a majority of the people that were there were also American, and that kind of also I think was an inspiration to me to go to America and to kind of see see that route as an option for me.
Well, that's incredible, because you were how old? Was 16?
Yeah, around that. I think I was 16 around that time. That same year, it was a great year for me. That same 15? Yeah, that's 15, 16, around that age. Don't know the exact age off the top of my head, but it was around that time. There was the U.S. Embassy in Ireland was running. Everything goes back to America at the end of the day, but the U.S. Embassy was running a competition to build a game, and I was already building apps at this time, but I wanted to build a game as well for this competition. So I built a game. It had to be a game related to the environment. So I made a game about the environment and how the oceans are polluted, and it was a 2D game. And I wrote the whole thing, and I ended up winning that competition. So I had that connection with the US Embassy. And I got invited to the US Embassy the day of the Web Summit. And I remember just being there with all these super rich entrepreneurs at the US Embassy. And I remember talking to this 17-year-old guy who was already a multimillionaire, and he was working at a company. I forget the name of the company now, but he was working at a company, and it was his company, and they were trying to basically like cure cancer, like in some way, shape or form.
At 17 years old.
Yeah, at such a young age. Like, and this guy, he's still, I've connected with him on LinkedIn. He's still doing fantastic stuff. But that was such a crazy time.
I just can't imagine being 17 or 16, 15 years old, being with all those inspirational people around you.
Yeah.
And I don't know.
Well, I'll tell you, I just remember eating the cocktail sausages, like just kept eating the cocktail sausages over and over and over again. I didn't really network too much at that event, but we got invited. It was another piece to the puzzle to be where I am now. Right. If it wasn't for that, I probably wouldn't be. Like, who knows? It was all these little things, but what it really stemmed for me was reaching out to people and asking people for help and asking people, hey, look at this. What do you think? Could I get anywhere with this? And that helped with Apple, and it also helped with AIB and getting the money to go to this conference.
I think that's one of the things that people has to get used to of creating stuff is like you have to ask for help.
Yeah. Yeah. And even Google is like the easiest way to ask for help.
YouTube is the best thing ever.
Yeah.
Like learning everything on YouTube is like the best thing ever.
Yeah.
It's free.
It is free. You can learn. I've learned so much from YouTube.
I think with anything, most of the stuff.
Yeah.
Unless it's really niche.
Exactly. Google is your best friend. I think being a good programmer is about being a good Googler.
Yeah, I really do. I understand that. Yeah.
And it's not easy to be a good Googler. You got to know what you're searching for, because sometimes things are hidden in Google and they're really difficult to find, particularly code examples and help in that regard. But yeah, it's about being a good Googler.
Yeah, I think it's really good advice to be a good Googler.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's
and as I told you before, like in Japanese we say Google Sensei.
Google Sensei, yeah, you did that. Yeah, Google Sensei.
Sensei in Japanese means teacher, because Google will teach everything. And then mostly, as long as you have internet literacy, you can know almost everything on Google.
Yep.
And Google will tell you everything you need to know, and that's why we call Google Sensei.
No, I love that. Google Sensei. I'm going to call Google Sensei.
Google Sensei. For everyone, Google Sensei. Repeat after me. Google Sensei.
Google Sensei.
Yeah, I think. Well, thanks for joining.
Yeah, I mean,
we could be talking about those stuff forever.
I know. Like, but we got to cut it off.
Yeah, we got to cut it off somewhere. So I'm hoping that we can start another podcast by ourselves.
Yeah,
this is like kind of my personal podcast, but I think it'd be great if we just start some kind of podcast together. Whatever.
Yeah. We'll come up with a topic and try to. Yeah. So
I'd
be interested in that.
Yeah. Before we end this episode, where can people find you? What's your Twitter? Probably
yes,
the best way?
I'm on a lot of social networks. The public ones are Twitter, Glenn Brann, GLENN, I also have a website, glennbranley.com. And then also I'm on LinkedIn too. You can connect with me on LinkedIn too if you want to reach out. Just search Glenn Branley on LinkedIn.
GitHub?
And GitHub too. That's like one thing I've started to make more public and contribute a lot more to things. That was one thing I never really did. But yeah, you can find me again, Glenn Brann, on GitHub too, and follow me on GitHub. Add me as a friend. Whatever you can do on GitHub, I'm not sure.
Sounds good. Good. Well, you can follow my Twitter. I'm Keigo Saito. And if you're listening to this as a normal audio podcast, then you should know that you can also watch this podcast on YouTube. Search KSMedia Podcast. Probably the best way to support this podcast is to subscribe to the podcast and maybe share with your friends and family. I'm thinking we both love music, and I love music, obviously, and play guitars together. And I've always wanted to support musicians in any possible way. I want to end each episode of this podcast with a song by someone.
I like that.
Some local musicians or musician that we know. But for now, well, thanks for joining.
Yeah, thank you so much, Keigo, for having me on. I appreciate it. And I hope we have many more.
I hope we can start another one, and then we just kind of keep making.
Yes.
Well, thanks so much. I just have a last cheers and let's end the podcast.
One more cheers for the road.
Yeah, cheers for the road.
Cheers.
Cheers, man. Yeah, another one.
That one cut out. This one's still going. Yay, that was a lot of fun, Keigo.
Hey guys, thanks for watching or listening to this episode of KSMedia Podcast. As I said before, I want to support musicians by ending each episode of this podcast with their songs. So today with this episode, I want to end with a song called Till I'm Done by Good Karma, spelled as Goodkrma. He's my friend from my high school in Maryland. His songs are available on Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, and other platforms as well. He's doing an amazing job, so go ahead and listen to his songs and support him. Again, thanks so much for listening. This is Till I'm Done by Good Karma. See you in the next episode.
Living
Bye.
on a movie script with my dogs. Curvy little shorty, out the way we hit it off. We growing over time, similar to fine wine. And she tell me all the time, you can have it all. Always planning out the steps, cause I gotta stay a foot ahead of the rest. Demons in my head trying to knock me off my path. Won't get the best of me even on my last breath. Till I'm done